Welcome to Season 2, Episode 16 of Operator Revolution, the podcast about operations. I'm Jason Carvalho, founder of Toronto-based Humanist.vc.
And I'm Clint Overton, co-founder of Boardroom Bullpen in St. Louis.
And we are your hosts. Today, we're going to get into a theme dubbed the leadership shift from founder control to operator cadence. Clint, how are you doing today?
I'm good. You?
Not too bad. Spent a little time outside this weekend. I know you spent a little time watching football.
I did. Got to watch my son play in person, some college ball this weekend, and then got some good time on the couch watching the NFL on Sunday.
Love it. I know those Bills won. Those pesky Bills set up their season real nice. We'll have to watch them the remainder of the season, see where they go.
It should be a fun season of college and NFL this year for sure.
Love it. Always miss it. Glad it's back. Speaking of back, we're back to discuss a topic that's usually on our minds, which is leadership. And specifically that founder transition of how CEOs evolve from that heroic problem solver to a decision frame maker when they're growing their business, either from 10 million to 20 million, 20 million to 50 million. I was just mentioning to you before we turned the live button on, I find CEOs tend to dip their toe a little bit into the water as transition is taking place, and they dip their toe back out and they dip it back in. So today I wanted to just unpack and provide for our listeners some thoughts on if you're a CEO, you're dealing with that growth stage, you're bringing on maybe a fractional, building your team, you're trying to figure out what your team needs to do. What are the angles? What do you need to do in order to get to that next level?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I think we've seen a lot of in the last couple of years, and we talk about pretty frequently, that evolution of an organization and what the biggest constraint to kind of next milestone of success is. And it really all starts with the leadership team, and fundamentally it starts at whoever's kind of at the top of the team there, which is usually a founder, could be a family enterprise business in some cases where there's been transition of family leadership to the CEO role. But just kind of recognizing as you elevate your organization, how you need to start thinking and acting differently in terms of how you lead, and how difficult that transition often is for folks that are in that seat.
And I think for CEOs, we run into a lot of them that don't have co-founders. And when you're a single CEO and you've successfully built an organization, potentially to 10 million, maybe 20 million, kind of just on the back of yourself and your own vision, it's daunting to give up the reins. It's daunting not to control everything. And, the request to CEOs here today is you have to ask yourself what kind of organization will survive that next stage that you're trying to get it to. One where you hold all the keys to all the doors, or one maybe where you've trained people on which keys to use to open which doors. I think that's a difficult one, right? But we've run into this mindset shift change, which does require some level of insight and time to accept that building systems and building processes and maybe coaching is really what the organization needs for the next steps.
Well, I think that, you can attribute this even to moving from an individual contributor to a leadership role, like in any size organization, magnified significantly when you are the person running a company. But to me, it's really simple. There's a fundamental difference between doing and leading. And just like it is in terms of, your more traditional Fortune 1000 company, that person who's really bright and shows promise that somebody kind of elevates into a leadership role, sometimes they do really well and sometimes they really stumble and struggle. And that, because those skills and capabilities are not necessarily always translatable. So just because you're good doing doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be good at leading.
Yep.
And so I think there's that natural challenge for anybody who's in that CEO role, who tends to be very much the doer early on. But then it's not just kind of that, sometimes talk about the difference between willingness and capability. And so even if you're capable of doing it, which sometimes is a big challenge to overcome, is the willingness, which is all about the vulnerability of the leader to let go a little bit, which I think is part of the conversation that we're going to have today, is that transition in terms of what it means to become a leader, and then how you have to kind of put yourself in a different mindset in order to be successful in doing that.
Yeah, 100%. I think leadership to date has been marketed as loud, in your face, make the call, it's on you. But really, what leaders need to do is look to create an environment where they can create trust, they can let go, they can provide room for other voices to come to the table with solutions. I think it could be as simple as you're having a discussion with someone and they're asking you, you know, here's my problem, and rather than giving them the solution, setting aside a time to say, hey, what do you think you need to do? Walk us through the problem. And I think those little changes change the atmosphere within an organization. They showcase more of a coaching mentality versus a dictatorial one.
Well, and I think that's an important step, but you mentioned this kind of right off the jump when we got started today, that tipping the toes in and out of the water. And so while it is a meaningful step forward to ask somebody for feedback and ask for their input, it's a bigger step to allow them to just go do it. And so I think that sometimes leaders believe they're being a great, or aspiring leaders, maybe is a better way to say it, believe they've really taken a giant step when they ask for somebody to provide input, but you really don't fundamentally let go until you allow somebody to sink or swim, right? And give them the chance to completely do it on their own. And I think one of the things that you were alluding to off the top, which we see happen, which is why a lot of businesses are restricted in terms of reaching their capability and ceiling, is we forget when we're leading an organization that we're leading other humans, right? And that, we sometimes give ourselves way too much credit for how much of all those things we can control. But what generally will happen is if you have somebody talented or several talented people in your organization, that you kind of give them the opportunity to contribute, but then you don't really allow them full accountability to go do it, is they start pulling back, because the natural tendency for many people is that you keep getting my hopes up and then you are not demonstrating enough trust in me. Why am I going to continue to put forth the energy to do this? And so you're unintentionally putting a cap on what that person's capability is and your organization, because you're not demonstrating fundamental trust in them. And we see that happen, I think, time and time again. And just the massive blind spots that we sometimes see founders of organizations in companies that are growing, that are like, hey, I brought in this third party and we have this operating system, or hey, I went to this leadership summit, or I had this one conversation. It's like, that's great, but it's a start. It is by no means the finish line. And so it's just that big transition of not just talking the talk, but also walking the walk, which I think is also one of the big challenges that ascending leaders have, is to actually make that pivot to not just talk about how they're going to change, but actually demonstrate that they're changing. And the biggest portion of that is truly letting go.
Yeah, and it can be tough. We understand that. I think in a fast-paced organization, time is the issue for everyone. The world's become more competitive. The pressures of missing out are on the shoulders of the CEO. But I think there's more team confusion when you're building at that scale and you don't have a pure strong bench that can handle everything that you need to handle. And I think, in the case of a CEO, I think their role really is to definitely find that talent and nurture that talent, and provide an opportunity where they are, we've talked about this before, really focused in again on the vivid vision and finding the players to bring in to execute on that vivid vision. Because the team confusion leads to missed opportunities, leads to, as you already stated, lack of trust. It leads to just inability to perform. And I think, communication is a big component of that as well. And a lot of the teams that I walk into, the communication isn't there. Like, I think putting in the wrench time to talk with your team is pivotal. I think it's under discussed. We've had a few episodes about people cutting meetings now, and like what is the cadence of a good meeting, and folks can go and check out some of those previous episodes. But you need to talk to your team. A big component of this transition about trust is spending time with your team. And it does require you to put in that wrench time.
Well, and I think to kind of go back to your point of the vision of an organization, is there's all these kind of building blocks, especially as a business is getting bigger. It's just like building a bigger building, right? The foundation has to continue to get larger, to support what you're building on top of it. And so having that vision is great, but then really having clarity in terms of the strategic plan to make that vision a reality, and then all the other fundamentals to execute that strategy, of which your leadership organization and the talent that you need within your organization to be successful is a huge fundamental part of that. And so to me, on an annual level, let's validate the vision. Let's validate the strategic plan. Let's go back and look at our organizational design. And then within that, it's not just ideas. It is, here's the roles we need in the organization to fulfill the strategic plan. Who owns that? Like, actually, even stepping back further, what are the skills and experiences necessary for us to be successful in those roles?
Yeah, the capability.
And then making sure that we're putting together a team to accomplish that. And if, as your organization is growing from 10 to 20 or 20 to 50 million, and you have like these 5 or 6 or 7 roles in the organization that are important for the business to be successful, and regardless of what you draw on paper, if what's really happening is it's the CEO who is in most of those seats, like that's problem number one. So really being able to step back and say, what do we need? What is the experience and skill set? Do we have it? If we don't have it, is there a way for us to build it internally? Or are there places where we need to go out and start to build the bench so that we can be successful? And so that CEO or founder can only pull everybody along so far. And at some point, the weight gets too heavy. And that heaviness is going to be a restriction for the organization to continue to grow.
Yeah, for sure. So go in, diagnose the people, org design, align the roles, execute through accountability. That's really pivotal. I think an interesting question that teams who are struggling have is, what more can they do in this when this is taking place? Like, how can they take ownership? And from my perspective, like when a reset like this is taking place under the, I think on the accountability component, I think teams can be proactive and showcase. I don't think it's just like a one-way street. I think, the CEO definitely has to be all in to the change. They have to create the environment. They have to create the rules. They have to create the accountability, scorecards, KPIs, all that fun stuff. But the flip side to that coin too is, if you love your organization, you love what's going on, you love your role, you too have to go in and be proactive. You have to continue to build that trust. I think one of the hardest questions in this unique time of growth for a company is, how does one, as a CEO or an executive, how does one make a decision that somebody's coachable? And that is an ongoing, I think, discussion in today's environment, especially when we look at components like AI and AI agents coming into the conversation, and what are the pros and cons of using AI versus, say, again, dealing with just a human. But to pull out to 30,000 foot, again, if you're a team member, being proactive and showcasing that you do have ideas, that you can take the reins, you basically say, like, look, let me build the strategy. I think that's important for staff to come to the table as well.
No, for sure. I mean, here's one of the biggest problems I see in companies today. Again, leaders they go out to these networks and they're part of these organizations and groups, and there's a bunch of big ideas, and the word accountability is utilized over and over and over again.
Yeah,
but it's not actually put into practice. It's just an idea in an organization. It's a word that's used all the time.
Yeah.
But nobody really holds anybody accountable. And so you have to have the process, systems, and cadence to do that. And so that's regular feedback loop, regular coaching, clear goals and accountabilities, going back to someone when they're not achieving what's expected, having a discussion around what's going to be done differently going forward in order to achieve those objectives, providing support for them as much as you can. All those things are part of the process. It's not just let's get in a room once a week and say you're accountable for this. If you don't have any of the other stuff, it's kind of a useless proposition. So I think having all of those systems in place to do it, you're right, it's a two-way street. There's a lot of communication. But I think back to what I think your original point is willingness and capacity, which I know I mentioned earlier in the episode, which I just believe strongly in, is the sooner you can identify, is this person willing to do what's expected in this role to be successful?
Yeah.
And are they capable of doing it? The better off everybody is. Because I think even if you get into this model where you're starting to put people in different jobs in the organization and roles, The other big challenge that many organizations have is that they put all these things in place, which is a huge step in the right direction, but then they're completely unwilling to make the difficult decisions to say, Bobby or Susie is not willing and or capable to do this job. And we're just going to, however many months or years, are we just going to keep holding on to this, dream that something's going to change, right? And that is another huge restriction, that even if you get far enough along that you're willing to put these people in these seats, are you willing to make the difficult decisions in different levels of the organization? And sometimes these folks still have tons of value to give to the business, but it's just not in the seat that you have them in.
Correct. Yeah, 100%. And we do have an episode for those listeners, Right People, Right Seats. It's a fan favorite, actually, in fact. I just wanted to go back to that one piece that you noted on feedback. I think staff are hungry for feedback. Top performers are hungry for feedback. Part of that align phase is making sure you do have the proper feedback loops to set up those teams for success, so you can see who's going to rise to the task. And again, a lot of organizations, they haven't spent the time again to map out what does feedback look like within the organization. How is it constructed? How is it connected to specifics of performance reviews or compensation plans? You mentioned a little bit about coaching. What is the definition of coaching for that organization? What is the process for it? So again, you got to do the wrench work. You got to do the time. As long as you're willing, you've got the systems, you've got the processes, you'll get the accountability, you'll get the buy-in. Love this episode. I've got nothing more to say on this. I think we've covered pretty much all of it. Thoughts?
No, I mean, I think just kind of bringing it back together is, as your business is growing, making sure that you have the vision and the strategy in place, you have an organizational design that helps you fulfill that strategy, making sure that within that organizational design, here's the skills and experiences necessary. Start putting that team together, have the processes and systems to hold people accountable, to have the right feedback and communication. And then really, as a leader, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. Give people enough autonomy to do what you've asked them to do. Let them spread their wings. And then if they're not able to or willing to, being willing to make the difficult decisions. I mean, all those things in totality, if you're willing and able to do that as an organization, you have the recipe for success. But if you choose to opt out of some of those things, it's going to be very difficult to fulfill what the capabilities of the organization are.
And I'll throw in one little gem of advice that you gave me earlier in the last few weeks. Keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to over-engineer anything. Simple, and keep yourself aligned and focused.
Indeed.
With that, I'm Jason Carvalho.
And I'm Clint Overton.
We'll see you next time.